Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. I'm your host, Ben Crossman. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, I hope all of you are having a great day as we get things kicked off here with, another episode of Computer America. And today's show, trust me, you're going to want to stick around for computer and technology news because we have a bunch of different stories that we are going to cover, including things like Gmail's new redesign. Apparently those were leaked, and our favorite thing is to find information that shouldn't be out there and say, hey, let's dissect this to the nth degree. Always fun. And then, other things like Impossible Foods, we've been keeping track of them. They're heading to White Castle, of all places. That food that, actually I might get, no, whatever. That food that is almost considered not food itself is going to be, well, kind of in the same vein. Just kidding. I like White Castle. Don't sue me. But hey, it's, bunch of different stories from across the spectrum. Don't worry about it. We have you covered. But that is in the second part of the episode, where the first part of the episode is dedicated to a company called Bomgar. And if you haven't heard what they do and, how they do it, well, here to tell us all about it and, the security side of, connecting computers to one another, and how do you keep something so innately, open or, kind of open to, fraudulent activities, and how do you keep that safe? And how do enterprises and things like that kind of manage all these systems that are connected, and at the same time make sure that only those who should be accessing them do so. So yeah, here to talk about that, he'll be joining us in just a moment, but a couple of things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes to just a link to our guest website. Everything and anything can be found at our homepage, computeramerica.com. While you're there, check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, and check out the live video feed, which is brought to you by OWC. So I think with all that said, we're just going to go ahead and jump into this and bring our guest on. So once again, Bomgar, and joining us to tell us all about the company and their technology is Mr. Sam Elliot. He is the Director of Security Product Management for the company. So Sam, welcome onto Computer America.
Hey, Ben. Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun because this is a technology that because we kind of work with so many different companies here on Computer America, sometimes, we do like tech support, and we do, connect different, just different services. And I'm finding more and more that the ability for those companies to kind of reach through the internet and control my computer is becoming much more commonplace, where you can do it through a browser, you can do it through downloaded software, you can do it just takes like a pin code, and you're off to the races. So this technology seems to have come a far way, and that's either good or bad security wise. And I guess you're gonna kind of break that down for us. So, but before we get to that, give us some background on Bomgar, what they do, when did they start, and give us a bit of background on yourself. How did you find yourself working with the company?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so you make some great points there. The remote access is everywhere today. It seems like there's all kinds of solutions to make that happen, to facilitate. Hey, I'm somewhere not at my system that I need to connect to, or maybe I need some help from the outside across the internet, as you said. I think the real trick to determine whether it's good or bad is really taking a good look at the security of the solution itself, and are there good controls in place so data can't be leaked, or so credentials can't be misused, or privilege rights that you may get while connecting remotely could be misused as well. So those are all interesting things that we think about quite a bit, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Ben.
Yeah.
The company Bomgar, we got our start in about 2002 when our founder really kind of was struggling with that challenge that you just highlighted. There wasn't an easy way to remotely get to a system, and he got tired of jumping in his car and driving all over town to do some of the IT work he had to do, and set out to make a solution. And now, here we find ourselves in 2018. We have about 13,000 organizations around the globe who use Bomgar to secure their access and their privileged accounts. And it's been, quite a ride and quite a journey. At Bomgar, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Security Product Management. So what that means is I look after the security product lines of the products that we make. So we have technology both in remote access or privilege access, but we also have technology in enterprise credential management, which really allows you to manage the privilege credentials that all these breaches tend to stem from, right? A compromised, stolen domain admin, or maybe a SQL database user. Those credentials get stolen and then are used to move laterally. So we make technology to help secure those, but still maintain productivity in the organization. So my team and I are responsible. We add new capabilities into our products. We innovate using new technologies as they come out. And our goal is to solve privilege access security challenges that could be attack vectors that are used by threat actors, and to do it in an easy way.
So obviously we're talking more on a large business scale, because if you had to manage maybe a dozen computers at one work site, that could just take someone on site. That doesn't take a lot. But I guess if you have offices around the country, in multiple places, hundreds or thousands of systems, something like this really becomes useful. And I guess my question is, that usefulness, you mentioned that the founder didn't want to drive. Is this a product of someone who's looking to, kind of cut travel time, or are the trade-offs for, actually being able to manage these large systems worth the trade-offs of potentially, compromising your system, using your own technology that you are handing out to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially the technology started out of wanting to conserve time and conserve effort going from place to place. But now with resources that you may need to control that are up in the cloud, like I'm thinking about Amazon's web services, for example, you can only access those systems through remote means. And traditionally, the way that those, without a solution built intentionally for those types of communications, they can inadvertently expose vulnerabilities that could be exploited. When you put a machine on the internet that maybe has an open remote desktop port, which is the way some of this ransomware is spreading, those can lead to unintended consequences. So you started out making those decisions to open those kind of communication technologies, and to allow them to be open in an effort to make it easier for somebody else to do their job. But the challenge is kind of, on the flip side of the coin, is that by opening that port to make something easy for someone else in your company to do their job, you've also left yourself open to a threat actor who may want to attack that and use that to gain a toehold into these large organizations. And when you're talking about organizations at scale, not just the handful of systems that maybe a small shop, a small IT team is dealing with, when you're talking about systems on the scale of tens of thousands of systems, it becomes easy for a threat actor to hide. And so that's why the traditional mechanisms that are just concerned with getting you to the system and maybe not concerned with what happened at the system, can I record everything that went on during a remote session, Do I have good auditing controls so I can look at it after the fact if something went wrong? And can I prevent a malicious user from using remote access to gain a foothold in the environment and then to ultimately exfiltrate data? That's when you have to move to a more specialized technology that's kind of designed with those kind of challenges in mind.
So, and I guess the part where, I would see it being a real challenge would be the fact that, we've mentioned it a couple times here with a couple guests, but ease of use is the opposite of secure. If something is super easy to get into, then obviously it's, super easy for pretty much anyone. And if it's really secure, if there are long, complex passwords, if it checks where you're logging in from, blah, 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 then maybe it's just not easy enough to use. And that leads to its own set of vulnerabilities for, the people who actually need to, get work done. So talk about that balance and how Bomgar kind of approaches that, where it's I'm sure that there are people who maybe need access to one thing but don't need access to another, and it may be easier to just give everyone kind of blanket credentials. Talk about the usability of kind of what we're talking about here, because that seems, again, if you're managing tens of thousands of systems and of course employees, that seems like a headache to kind of manage.
Yeah, it totally is, and you're absolutely right. If a system is not easy to use, then your end users will work around that technology, and of course that will leave you potentially exposed to even more vulnerability, or creating more vulnerabilities than you anticipated. And instead of shrinking your attack surface, you may inadvertently expand your attack surface. And so Bomgar takes that very seriously. We talk a lot about balancing security with productivity, and the way we do that is through this concept of making least privilege productive. And what we mean by that is making sure that our technology integrates with existing technology. So, for example, if you're in a large organization, most organizations today are using some version of Microsoft's Active Directory for user management. So that makes managing users much easier at scale, managing the rights, what they have access to, and things of that nature. And so the key area for any technology that you're looking at is to making sure that it integrates with those existing systems, so you don't have to go and recreate the wheel, say, to give users access to particular systems or particular credentials. And when you have that kind of integration in place, then it becomes much more manageable to ensure that who has access to what and when is something that you can actually solve for. Because the thing that we absolutely are trying to fight against at Bomgar is this idea of, well, it's too challenging to use the technology, so I'm just going to give blanket access to everyone. Mm-hmm. As soon as you do that, then you have just increased the probability that your organization is going to suffer from some kind of a cyber breach at some point. You've got to make sure that you know from a remote access standpoint who the folks are that are using those remote access tools. So it's important that your listeners have probably thought a lot about multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. You have a way to identify that a user is who they say they are when they go to connect to a system. And you talked about complex passwords. We see the approach to that certainly continuing to use the good password guidelines that your organization puts forth. But with the technology that we put in place, you can actually spin those passwords after each use, or rotate those passwords after each use. And that's important because if a threat actor has actually compromised a credential, it can only be used for a very short time, because as soon as that credential has been used by an authorized user, our automated systems will go and change that credential. And so nobody has any awareness of that credential except for the system itself, and the system handles the auditing controls and putting those credentials into the systems for authentication as needed. And that greatly reduces the opportunity for a malicious user or a threat actor to compromise that credential and run off with it, and then use it for purposes of no good later down the road in their goal to exfiltrate
Right.
data from your organization.
That is a kind of a trend that I'm seeing with whenever security people come on, is that there seems to be certain kinds of technology that are being developed that are kind of independent from the end user, where things like being able to analyze people's behaviors. Is the person interfacing with the with the login? Are they using the tab key? Are they clicking? Is that normal, or are they entering kind of robotic macros to input
Right.
information? Like, it seems like, and now you just added another one to that, where you swap credentials behind the scenes. And I guess I guess that really shows that, as vulnerable, like, really one of the most vulnerable places we've seen is actually the employee, because they are susceptible.
That's right.
They'll click links. They will give access to people who shouldn't have access. Is that a focus for you, just as just security minded, that security should be more complex but also a bit more invisible?
Yeah, and I think I like the way you put that. I mean, I think that that is an important concept when you're thinking about balancing productivity and security. You want to not get in the user's way. You want to allow them to do what they need to do to get their day job done. But you also want to make sure it's very challenging for a threat actor to take advantage of what you've put into place. And if you really think about it, I mean, the hackers are all using automated technology anyway, right? They're scanning the internet all the time, looking for vulnerabilities. They're attacking your user base with automated phishing campaigns and hoping, just by the sheer numbers that they're going after, that somebody clicks something. And we can see that is a strategy that works, and it works well. But who it works well on are organizations that haven't thought about the importance of this move to both automating and controlling what we think of as privilege identity management or privilege access. I saw we talk about in some of the conversations that we have when we do talks at trade shows or security conferences. There's it's quite. It wouldn't raise any eyebrows if you were to go to an incident response team like a SecureWorks or a Mandiant or some of these guys that are great at responding to these breaches when they happen in organizations, and you ask them, hey, would you say it's fair to say 100% of your incident responses involve a stolen credential? And you would probably see a lot of my peers say, yep, that's absolutely true. That's ultimately what those attackers are getting to. And that stolen credential, as you said, can come because a business user was phished, and then that threat actor has the ability to then use some memcache tools, like maybe like a Mimikatz, if your listeners are familiar with that tool, for extracting credential hashes from a system. So if a system administrator, let's say, was on the system earlier in the day to install a printer driver, there's a pretty good chance that there's a credential hash on that machine that is what a threat actor would go after in order to get an elevated set of credentials that they could then use to move laterally through the environment. So if kind of going back to my point, if the hackers are using automation to attack you, you've got to think about using automation to defend your organization.
Now, to bring this back down a little bit more to earth, and this is a question here about Atlanta. You guys are based out of Atlanta. Great city to drive by. Unfortunately, I've never actually been there, but they have their own problem with security currently ongoing. I think we reported on it a while ago. Have not been keeping up to date because I think they're at this kind of standstill, that until they pay the ransom, they're kind of stuck, and they said they're not going to pay the ransom. So talk about what's happening in Atlanta. And I mean, a major city, like really one of the biggest cities in the country, you think they'd have some of the best kind of IT people and infrastructure to protect that city. How were they compromised?
Right. Yeah. So it's a brave new world, I guess, from an attacker standpoint. So ransomware in general, it's a type of malicious software that's designed to block access to a computer system until you pay some sum of money, right? And typically, the way they're blocking access is that they will encrypt all the files on the system, so it's not useful. You've lost your email, you've lost your configuration files that allow you to launch applications. Really crucial stuff. And that's what's happened at the city of Atlanta. They have been infected with some ransomware. So the modern age of ransomware, it started with some ransomware called CryptoLocker in just a short while ago, really in 2013, and it's really taken off. And we talked about phishing earlier. That is one of the most common delivery systems for ransomware. A business user is logged into their system. They're logged in with some kind of elevated rights. They click a link or open an attachment, and once that attachment has been downloaded, that installs the ransomware. It can take over the victim's computer, and then the ransomware can begin to propagate itself throughout the environment. In the case of the city of Atlanta, they've been down for well over a week. I think they're into probably their third week of battling a ransomware called SamSam, and no relation. But
Okay.
So the SamSam ransomware attack, it's really caused them serious disruptions. In 5 of the city's 13 local government departments, they are completely offline and using pens and paper. It's had really some major impacts. I'm sure you reported on this when you guys were talking about it earlier when it first happened. It's the court system, websites are down, so people can't get their information about their court dates. The city of Atlanta has a water utility, so they can't pay water bills online. There's limited communications across the various infrastructure requests, and the police department has been filing paper reports. So we're really sent back in time about 20 years. So it's bad. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, it really makes you question. I mean, if these things are so vital, and none of those, I don't think any of those are explicitly putting people in danger. I think there were some cases of like 911 call centers, unfortunately having to take down pen and paper and kind of report these things along the way. But it makes you wonder if these things are so vital. Why hasn't one of two things happened? Either one, kind of a mantra here on the show, backup, always have a system restore handy, be ready for that. Or, number two, 3 weeks, I'm not an expert in, kind of IT deployment times, but 3 weeks is a pretty decent time. You could probably get new computers out, or just kind of flash like where do you think, just as a security person, where do you think the city of Atlanta went wrong?
Yeah, I mean that's challenging. I think first of all, the SamSam ransomware is a little bit different, and unlike many of its variants that are spread through phishing. It is spread through, exploiting vulnerabilities or guessing weak passwords in any public-facing systems. So maybe somebody in the city of Atlanta needed some help at some point, and they turned on the remote desktop protocol access on a system to the internet. And then when the city of Atlanta was targeted by the group that's using the SamSam ransomware, that targeting uncovered that system, and then likely that's an entry point. We don't have a lot of details yet on exactly what's going on at the city of Atlanta and where the time is being, what's taking that time to get recovered. We do know, I saw a news report last night that talked about some of the things that are happening there. Our local Channel 2 News, they have an investigative team, and they've obtained some records that confirm that the city of Atlanta has paid out about $2.7 million on 8 emergency contracts to come in and help clean up. And it seems like that what they're doing, instead of just replacing the infected systems, which if they just go that route, maybe immediately could be reinfected as they come back online. It seems really what they're doing is starting over from scratch and getting some guidance from some really good organizations that can help them when they rebuild at a foundational level come back up. Unfortunately, I think that this is, I like your comment earlier where you mentioned that this is a big city. They should have the best of the best. It's probably not true, although I wish it was. Obviously, being from Atlanta, I think that we've seen some publication recently that indicated that the city of Atlanta actually suffered another cyber attack back in April 2017. In that case, it exploited the internal blue Windows network file sharing vulnerability to infect a system with a backdoor known as the double pulsar, and that's used for loading malware onto the network. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just real quick, I mean, I guess I said that comment, and at the same time, I knew it was wrong because when you look at another ransomware, with WannaCry that happened to the National Health Services over in Europe, I said that they should have the best of the best, but I'm sure that you know better because, talking with your customers and dealing with, public financial medicine, these systems are put into place and then they stay that way for 15 years. People have to be retrained on how to use Windows XP because they come from, Windows 10. And I guess, what is your advice to these companies? Because, I know that upgrading is a big problem. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time. It's going to be more money than you ever want to spend on something that, ideally makes no difference. But I mean, especially with like Windows XP, the vulnerabilities that they are still finding and have found for the past 15 years are, your system is more susceptible to them year over year. Like, the vulnerabilities are known. I mean, just how are they justifying not updating their systems? Is it, purely financial? We don't have the man hours, resources to do this, so we're going to deal with it as it comes?
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot to do with it. You think about budgeting for security doesn't become a priority until a breach has happened. It's really hard to justify the ROI on security tools. And, that's something that we talk about a lot, which is why we try to make sure that organizations understand they could actually increase their productivity with the security tools so there can be some kind of ROI justification, because nobody wants to see an organization wait until they've been breached in order to start doing something about it.
It really feels like what happened with the National Health Services. Like, there was that one hacker. He mentioned that he was able to redirect something so that it sandboxed itself and essentially killed itself. That it was really like a superhero moment. Like, hey everyone, I fixed this problem for you. This is like, I guess what's happening in Atlanta is what happens when you don't have that one ethical hacker who's like, hey guys, I figured this out. It's an ongoing problem.
It's an ongoing problem. That's right. And unfortunately, it looks like the trend is just there is a challenge getting good security hygiene, and I'm sure there's any number of factors that are causing that to happen. They probably do have a fantastic security team who is just pointing at, look, we've got a ton of organizations to deal with. Like we said, 5 of 13 departments are impacted. There's probably an IT team that's stretched pretty thin. Then you combine that with budget issues, you combine that with the pain that it takes to upgrade, as you talked about, and it kind of makes for a perfect storm.
So how? I'm sorry. I just wanted to talk about the effects of this because you mentioned people can't pay water bills. There are people, I guess, court filings that are happening on paper, and I mean, even I guess week over week, the longer that this goes on, I guess when the systems finally do come back up, it's going to be a whole nother chore to digitize all those documents that should have been, digital to begin with. And actually, Sam, before we continue, I will say that we're about to head on over to break here in like 30 seconds. Would you mind staying over so we can finish up the conversation?
Sure, no problem.
All right, perfect. So, everyone, we are talking to Mr. Sam Elliot. He is the Director of Security Product Management for Bomgar, and we're talking about remote access and, I guess what happens when things can go wrong and how things can go right. So, yeah, we'll come back. We'll wrap up this conversation about Atlanta, what's happening there, how it's affecting people, and then we'll talk a bit about, kind of what businesses, government agencies, financial, medical, what they can do to make sure that, this doesn't happen again, because sadly, it probably will. So the music means that we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more Computer America. And again, later on in the program, we will be doing computer and technology news, and that's brought to you by OWC. So everyone, stay tuned. More Computer America, more Bomgar right after this.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Why? Because you can save 45% on packages compared to your high-priced cable bill. Wow. Take those giant scissors out and cut the cable and save with Dish TV. Plus, you get a free DVR upgrade to record your favorite shows and free installation. And with Dish Anywhere, you can watch TV for free on your mobile device. Act fast. You can save hundreds of dollars. Does your cable company do that for you? I don't think so. Get all the best TV programming at your fingertips at a fraction of the price of cable TV. So say adios, arrivederci, goodbye to the high cable bill and save up to 45% on Dish TV packages today. These are limited time offers and can change at any time. Call fast.
800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. That's 800-471-5325.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here with our guest, Bomgar. If you want to check them out, bomgar.com, BOMGAR.com, or a link in the show notes. Again, computeramerica.com. It'll be up there for like 2 weeks, so, we got you covered. So, with that being said, we continue on with our conversation with Mr. Sam Elliot. He is the Director of Security Product Management for the company. And yeah, Sam, I apologize I had to cut you off, but we were about to get into the impact this has had on, kind of the locals and government and, kind of other parts of the government. You mentioned a couple of symptoms. I guess, my other question in the same vein is, do you think there's been a lot of effects on how to keep this from spreading to other parts of the government and how that's taken a toll? Just how is Atlanta handling this as a whole?
Yeah, so they're being pretty tight-lipped about the details, which is a good thing. So they don't invite more attacks. But I think we've seen that they have failed some security compliance assessments in the past. Which is obviously not a good thing. Probably that would lead to the compromise that we've seen at the city of Atlanta. But as I mentioned earlier, we have seen about 8 emergency contracts signed for about $2.7 million in spend for restoring, and not just restoring, but I'm sure getting ground up security built in, so this can't happen again. If you look at that spend as compared to what the original ransom was for $51,000, that's a huge difference. But this is the type of challenge that we're dealing with in today's in today's threat landscape, where organizations need to be able to defend themselves, or else they'll end up in a situation like this. And Atlanta is certainly not alone in its preparedness issues. I'm sure it's true across the country that municipalities just have a very limited budget, and they've got to spend money on the immediate needs. And as we talked about earlier, it's hard to justify security as an immediate need if you're not actually under attack.
Right. And it's a situation where I guess you mentioned several millions of dollars in response, 2 million, something like that, where, they might have been able to spend that before. They still might have gotten hacked. Like, this is more fixing the problem, because even if they just paid and then, the people were happy to walk away with $50,000, that doesn't mean that Sam doesn't become, let's see, Tom is a registered trademark. Sam becomes, JoJo or whatever. And it's just a little twist, change the name, change the font, and they reinfect your whole system and you pay another $50,000. Like, paying the ransom encourages more similar activity because it works. So I guess this however much money they do end up spending is kind of necessary, and even better if they actually upgrade the system for kind of future improvements. So it's unfortunate, but like you said, it's it happens. So with that being said, let's talk about best practices that maybe Atlanta, if you're listening, here's an I told you so. Large industries, large companies, even small medium business. What are some of the best things they could have done to protect themselves? Is this a matter of having a pop-up blocker? Is this a matter of changing your password more than once every 2 years? What do you recommend people do and organizations do to protect themselves?
Right. So ransomware, it's not some amazing, artificial intelligence program that can learn stuff and adjust on its own like you might see in the movies. It's just a program that looks for specific vulnerabilities, and it's programmed to exploit those vulnerabilities. And what it really relies on is someone not implementing basic security tenets. So in the case of City of Atlanta, everything we're seeing is probably just a miss on having these security foundations in place. And that's why that ransomware was able to gain a foothold and run its course and get us to the point where we are now. So there's, what can you do to protect? You rattled off some of the things that we should have done in the first half of the segment. Keeping the operating systems patched and up to date. That means there's going to be fewer vulnerabilities to exploit. Mm-hmm. Don't install software or don't give administrative privileges for your business users. Kind of function under the concept of least privilege. Make sure that you do have up-to-date antivirus software, some kind of technology. There's all kinds of stuff out there now, which will help you detect and defend from malicious programs, but still letting you whitelist and use your business applications. You mentioned also backing up your files frequently, making sure that happens all the time. That's not going to stop an attack, but you may be able to roll back, as you implied, to the days before the attack, and then get yourself protected so as not to rehash. Now, in the case of SamSam, because it is a bit different in that this variant does go after known open communication protocols and attempt to brute force those protocols, and it has some other attack vectors. You also need to ensure that as an organization, you don't have those communication ports open to the internet that could be brute forced and then compromised and allow the ransomware to be installed. So you want to look at technology that allows you to still accomplish your goal of getting folks into systems from across the internet, but making sure that you're not at the same time opening vulnerabilities that could be exploited to and find your organization in a similar situation that the City of Atlanta is in.
So I guess my question is, and this is something that we kind of advise our listeners on, because we think that they are not only beautiful, but they're also smart. And they're smart enough to know that it's kind of like the adage with the bear or the shark. You don't have to be faster than the bear. You don't have to be faster than the shark, just the person next to you. And, kind of the same way with cybersecurity, you don't have to be, you don't have to be impossibly secure. You just have to be a harder target than the person who's trying to hack is looking for, because it's especially from like a personal point of view, if it takes even a little bit of work, all that automation is just going to pass right over you and look for someone else who, is susceptible to the bare minimum. Does that kind of advice work work with companies with such a large, I think you called it like, something field. Does it work for organizations with so many points of entry, or, is it about mitigating, or is it about recovery, or is it a mixture of both?
It does work. But I would add one element to it that is, it doesn't apply in your personal life, but it does in your organization. Most organizations also use other organizations to support their business efforts. So some type of third party, maybe they're coming in to monitor your organization's heating and air conditioning systems, or maybe they're coming in to help support an application that's mission critical for the organization. If your organization has done their job to secure themselves and their perimeter, so they can achieve that you just have to run faster than your neighbor in your bear analogy, the organization has to understand that their security perimeter also extends to those third parties. So if the organization has done a really good job of securing their security perimeter, but their heating and air conditioning vendor has a very weak security perimeter, it's very easy, and we've seen this happen over and over in the last 3 to 4 years, it's very easy for the threat actor to target the third party with the weaker security posture, get a foothold into that organization, and then use that third party's access to then pivot into the ultimate target. And so I think that is something that if you subscribe to that just run faster than your neighbor strategy, you have to make sure that you're accounting for everybody that should be thought of as part of your security perimeter.
Right. So let's talk about if someone out there maybe runs, obviously not one of those small shops we talked about, but someone larger. Walk us through the process of I need to get my organization secure, connected, remote access, all that good stuff. They approach Bomgar. What do you do? Do you set them up with a consultation? Do you talk about their need? Just walk us through what Bomgar does to kind of solve these problems.
Yeah, sure. So we would definitely have a consultative approach. We want to understand what business challenges the organization has before we just make recommendations on our technology. And so we tend to have a few conversations with the folks that are interested in the technology in the first place. We'll show some demonstrations of how, based on those conversations, of how our technology would fit into their business processes and could actually make them more productive. We'll offer some trials and some proof of concepts on the technology so they can actually kick the tires on their own, and then ultimately help them get that technology implemented and get them to a more secure security posture than they were before. One of the most typical scenarios that we see, Ben, is to achieve this remote access, especially with a third party involved. They'll often give a third party VPN access because that's the easiest way the IT team has to get somebody from outside the organization into the organization. And they'll give that third party VPN access, and they'll give them a set of credentials, and they'll give them some servers that they should connect to in order to do the job that they need to do, and kind of make that organization promise that they won't go and use those credentials for no good or that server access for no good.
Yeah, I saw that on your website. You have an infographic here. Give them access, not a VPN. VPNs are generally, we've had a lot of discussions here on the show. We've interviewed probably, almost every single player, well-known player in the market. And, VPNs, depending on who you use, when you use it, how you use it, they're really hit or miss. But in general, a lot of security experts, actually kind of recommend them. So I was surprised to see, give them access, not a VPN. So yeah, I meant to ask you about that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, you must use a VPN if you're concerned with your own privacy. Personally, using a VPN to browse the internet is something that I highly recommend. If you're in a business organization and you need to have your actual employees come into your organization and access the resources that are in that organization from, say, their home, a VPN is absolutely appropriate. I think what we've seen over the years is a bit of scope creep into the original mission and intent of a VPN, and that's where we kind of take umbrage to using a VPN for those kinds of use cases. So, for example, if I need to have a third-party vendor come in and help me with a system, we don't think that offering them VPN access is the right way to go, because that typically comes with an unfettered access. Instead of being highly restricted, it probably gets them access to a lot more than they need, and those can lead to problems. So we absolutely believe in the need of a VPN and the security through encryption that it brings you, so prevents man-in-the-middle attacks, people snooping on your data or your internet browsing. But we just don't agree with using a VPN for providing as the mechanism for providing remote access from one third party, for example, into a target organization.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said way at the beginning, where it's kind of easier to give blanket credentials. It's easier
That's right.
kind of instead of weeding them out. So yeah, we're actually checking out your infographic. Makes sense because, in situations like, kind of like you have here where remote employees, remote offices, people that are kind of on your payroll, you trust them enough, but then people who, kind of either don't control their own systems like you would, or, blah, 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 that's where you can run into trouble. So pretty interesting there. And I think actually we're going to kind of wrap up the conversation, but I see here you do have a lot more information. You have a blog, resources. If people want to find out more about Bomgar, where can they go and what can they find there?
Yeah, well, I would direct them out to bomgar.com. That's BOMGAR.com. And there's tons of resources, tons of free information to help educate yourself on how to approach securing the access pathways into your organization and getting your privileged accounts under control in a way that increases your organization's productivity instead of decreasing and adding more hurdles for your employees.
All right. Yeah. And there is certainly a lot there. So, Sam, thank you for staying over. I apologize we kept you, but I'm happy that we did. And everyone, once again, Sam Elliot, he is the Director of Security Product Management for Bomgar. And Sam, thank you for being on Computer America.
Ben, I really appreciate it. I had a great time.
All right. Our pleasure. And yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch, but have a good one.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. So there he goes. And we are going to go ahead and move on to computer and technology news. Oh, yep, computer technology news. Only a few minutes to do that. And fortunately, we have a lot of very interesting stories that I'm not sure how many we're going to be able to get to, but we're going to try. So computer and technology news brought to you by OWC. So here we go. All right, so I think our first one that we're going to do, and I'm picking them out here, trying to pick out the best of the best. And the first one we're going to do is because every time I hear the company Impossible Foods, if you haven't heard of them, they make a meat substitute. They have their own science behind it. It's plant-based. No animals were harmed in the making of it. It's probably the closest thing we have to a meat substitute that tastes and feels and just does everything like meat. And from everyone I've heard, meat eating, going vegetarian, not really desirable because you do lose a lot of people's regular diets. At the same time, a lot of people who eat meat, they don't say that, wait, you didn't kill an animal for this? Well, I'm just not interested. People still like animals. People still don't want to kill things. But, it's that trade-off. So this is the first situation where I think a lot of people have said, if you can replicate meat, if you could, it tastes like meat, it looks like meat, it chews like meat, whatever, but it doesn't kill an animal, they would switch over and they would pay more than they normally would, and they wouldn't look back. And so this is probably the closest that we are going to get for quite a while. So with that being said, Impossible Foods goes to White Castle. That's right, White Castle burgers. The ones that you buy in the freezer section, and they have stores. Whenever we drive down from North Carolina to Florida or just anywhere, it's great road food, is what I'm saying. But anyways, to get on with the article, this is from TechCrunch, saying that Impossible Foods is taking another bite out of the meat supply chain with the announcement that its meatless burger substitute is coming to America's first fast food burger chain, being White Castle. So that's right, now stone vegan hippies can join stone slackers in their quest for cheap, delicious burgery goodness. And I'm sure they're referencing Harold and Kumar. But at any rate, the Impossible Slider, which is made from Impossible Foods vegetable-based ground beef substitute, will now be available for $2 or as part of a combo meal. So it's hard to understand the importance of this, as Impossible Foods now makes the jump from higher-end, fast casual restaurants to a truly mass consumer fast food chain. And if the company's mission to be a viable competitor to ground beef and ultimately replace it, Impossible Foods was going to have to make the jump from Umami Burger to Impossible Slider at some point. And I think that's the case where people would be interested in trying this. Like, I think this is a great move for White Castle because it involves them saying, there's a market for this and we're going to want a lot of it. And if nothing else, just for the fact that you could try something that you haven't tried before, I think that people will go to White Castle just to eat this. So, hey, and besides that, if people like it, they'll demand more of it. And hey, that's when things really start to get interesting, is when White Castle does it, and White Castle is a big player in the market. But what happens when, it's a suitable replacement for McDonald's or Burger King or any of these other larger chains? You suddenly really start to change the landscape. And so here we go. So if anything, this is a great move, and it introduces it to a lot more people that aren't going somewhere to pay, $20 for a not meat hamburger. It has to be accessible. So saying that as part of the deal, the Impossible Slider will be available at 140 locations in the New York, New Jersey corridor around Chicago and its suburbs. So if you're in the lower part of the country, or you're not in New York, New Jersey, or Chicago areas, then unfortunately you're gonna have to wait a little bit. But hopefully it takes off, and hey, it comes to even more places even faster. So I think it's a great move, and I'm honestly excited. There's a reason why there's so many great stories, and that was one that I really wanted to kind of do first. So with that being said, let's go ahead and do this next one. This rocked, absolutely earth-shattering, not really, but the classic video game champion, Billy Mitchell. He was part of a documentary. He is known as the King of Kong, and well, turns out that his Donkey Kong scores were not true. And this is a situation where I think people in the scene, people who really follow vintage video game high scores and competitors, they kind of felt they already knew this. Every time that Billy Mitchell went on a talk show, went somewhere to demonstrate his skills, he was never able to, quote unquote, replicate his high score. He scored admirably, but he did not score at the record levels that he claimed he did. And it was a situation where the only other person that saw him do it and verified and got him into the Guinness Book of World Records, had a documentary about him, won him hundreds of thousands of dollars in prize money. The only other person that was vouching for him was a referee for vintage video games and his best friend. So all these things, again, it was kind of mysterious surrounding it. And, well, looks like they finally debunked him, saying that Billy Mitchell, the King of Kong, has had his long-contested Donkey Kong high scores stripped from the Twin Galaxy leaderboards, and the organization has notified the Guinness World Records of his decision. And more than that, all of his records have been removed from the forums, and he's banned from TG's competitive leaderboards wholesale. So he's a liar, and they will have no more of it. TG ran an independent investigation in addition to having at least two third parties perform their own, with other experts weighing in on the dispute as well. Yeah, they take old Donkey Kong scores very seriously. So they confirmed that the long-held suspicion that the provided evidence tape of King of Kong score didn't come from an actual arcade hardware. Same goes for his 1,050,200 point mortgage broker score, where it used to be that you had to stand there at an arcade cabinet, and that was the only way to play it. They proved that the video footage of him breaking the scores was actually done on an emulator, because people are crazy have the ability to observe the minor differences between an emulator and a traditional cabinet. So they said that previously the claim was that Mitchell recorded these scores using emulation software because the original hardware doesn't produce the board transmission images that were recorded, but because proving emulation would be far more involved and take even more time, TG settled on proving that the scores weren't the result of playing on an unmodified Donkey Kong PCB. So, with that being said, so after what seems like an eternity, Mitchell is no longer recognized as the first million-point Donkey Kong record holder. Now that honor goes to the longtime rival, Steve Wiebe. So, Steve, congratulations, and hey, the proper King of Kong, I guess, has been crowned. Pretty interesting. And, again, it's a small subset of people, but to those people, this is big news. So, all right, this one is one I didn't really understand, but I'm going to bring it to all of you anyways. And again, I'm sorry for kind of rushing through this. We like it when our guests run long, but there were a number of very interesting stories that I really wanted to get out. And one of those includes this story, vinyl. It's an old technology, but it's a physical technology that has been taking off over the past couple of years. As we move faster and faster into a completely digital world, there are people who want something physical that they can put their hands on, that they can keep, that they know that what they have in their hands is going to be there 10 years later in an unaltered form. So I think a part of that is why vinyl records have defied logic and reason and continued to be a player in music sales. Not a huge player. They don't hold a candle, but at the same time, it's just a trend that, reversed almost inexplicably. And now we have this new article from Timothy Sapala from Engadget saying that apparently high definition vinyl is coming next year. Yes, HD vinyl, as if that's even a thing. Maybe it is. I don't know. Let's find out. But the process of making records hasn't changed much over the last 100 years or so. But that itself could change soon. Austria-based Rebeat Innovation has begun the work to bring vinyl into the 21st century. And, it involves lasers. Specifically, converting analog audio information into a digital 3D topographical map of the music and then etching that into a platter with light. And according to Pitchfork, this process will result in around 40% longer playing times per side, 30% more amplitude, and will offer better sound quality overall. and it also sidesteps the chemical typically used in the record making process, so it's a little bit greener. Now, whether or not this actually works, we don't know, but if you want to check out the link in the show notes, we have that available for you. Folks, we're just flat out of time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Bomgar for joining us here on the show. Again, if anyone out there wants a link to any of the stories or our guests, please head on over to computeramerica.com, and we are available right there. Just a special treat for those of you who were able to stick it out to the very end. We will say that Computer America will be heading over to twitch.tv for our live stream instead of YouTube. So that's a transition, and there's going to be a greater emphasis on audience interaction in the coming weeks and coming months. So if you are a member of Twitch, then hey, tune in over there and check us out. But in the meantime, Computer America will still be on IRN and all the other places. Folks, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.